Hello and welcome back. This is my top 5 movies of 2023 video, and if you've ever wanted to hear me talk about modern releases, movies that matter right now in the present, this is the one time a year where you'll really get to hear me do that in at least a tiny bit of depth. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start at number 5, which is Cannibal Mukbang, which I would describe very simply as a beautifully twisted rom-com. The basic story is a loner guy who's a little bit awkward, falls in love with this girl who does mukbangs, so we got the quirky couple right there. And then on top of that, it's eventually revealed that she's a cannibal, and the movie sort of follows all the complications that stem from their developing relationship. Really, the first third to first half of the movie feels like a rom-com, and then the last half gets darker and darker and darker until there's a truly great third act that doesn't really pull any punches. It doesn't try to, clearly delineate what is good, what is bad, who you're supposed to be feeling for. And really, a great way to summarize the whole movie is that it just punches way above its weight. It looks better, it is acted better, it is structured better than pretty much any indie movie I can sort of remember in recent years. And it's just an absolute blast to watch. And to make clear how big of a deal that is for me to say that, my friends wanted to see this movie. Obviously, we were at Austin Film Fest. There's a movie called Cannibal Mukbang. You're going to want to go see it. And I had just been doing all of my research on the violence in film video, and so I was sort of worn out on horror movies and violent stuff, and I was like, I do not know about this, guys. I was like, I will go to this as your friend, as a favor. I really don't think I'm going to enjoy this. And then it turns out that by the time the movie was over, I think out of the three of us, I ended up being the biggest fan. This was just something that I just thought was wonderful. It was sort of simple, it was beautiful, and I guess in a way, it sort of tied into modern interest of mine because I care more about romance movies in general, and so leaning heavier into that really made it connect more with me. But it also feels like it's part of a newer wave. Maybe we'll see more movies like this of sort of romance cannibal movies. The other one is obviously Bones and All. And I think there's a really interesting dichotomy there with desire and relationships and the body being like sort of a barrier to that. And I just really enjoyed it. So if you ever get a chance to see it, I don't know where it's going to get released, but if it does get released, I'll probably update the description, say where you can watch it. But if you have the chance to go see it, go see it. It's really fantastic. And so that's my number 5 spot. So on to number 4, which just so happens to be Priscilla. I think the best way to describe this movie is as reservedly beautiful. It really knows how to use pauses and slowness and just small gestures and acting and just really waiting. And it really used that to great effect to capture Priscilla Presley's inner self, inner suffering, and then her struggles with everyone around her, especially Elvis, obviously. The funny story, I guess, behind this viewing was that me and my brother just assumed there was not gonna be anyone really in the theater. We were like, it's a Wednesday night or Thursday night, and there's not gonna be that many people there. It's a small town, an artsy movie. None of this is gonna combine. And then when we got there, we barely were able to get a seat. And then when we actually walked into the theater, we realized that we were the only 2 guys in the whole theater, and the rest was all blonde women. And we were very confused. We're like, these people don't look like normal artsy people. That's obviously very judgmental of us, but we were still sort of confused, trying to figure out the demographics of the room. Like, how do these people end up here? This is the moment when I realized who Jacob Elordi was. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know what else he'd been in. I'd seen Saltburn. I was like, yeah, he's a good actor. Cool. No idea that he was this sort of phenomenon right now. And then Saltburn trailer played before Priscilla, and I heard everyone whispering, and I go, oh, okay, this is when I realized that. And I hope they enjoyed Priscilla. I doubt they enjoyed Saltburn, although that sort of makes Saltburn's marketing genius because it would get all these people that would normally not watch something so messed up to watch something sort of messed up, probably scar them for life. So I guess that's at least props to doing something sort of funny. But back to Priscilla. I think it's really just a lovely movie. It does such a good job at not doing black and white, just like in Cannibal Mukbang where I said that third act doesn't give you any clear lines of right and wrong and it sort of leaves everything complicated. So does Priscilla, and I really appreciated that because there's obviously a way that you could very much and very easily go about this as Elvis is predatory, he's a horrible person, he's done so much wrong, there's all this evil, they didn't really love each other, it's just abusive, all this horrible stuff, and it does touch on all those things. It shows that he is abusive, it shows that he does have problems, it shows that he was predatory, but it still doesn't deny that there was love, or at least some form of love in their relationship. And I think a key part of that was the ability to not so much show what love is or what it could be, but just focus on the relationship. And I think sidelining Elvis was key to this, because what the story is at its heart is it's the story of a girl who never really got to know or understand or grow up and experience love. in a variety of ways to figure out what it really is. This is someone who became involved very young, never had that chance to grow up, to be with multiple people, to understand what love is and how that works, but rather had this distant partner who had a strict view of love, and how the view of love is something that is sacrificial or has to continue at no matter what cost. All this sort of stuff is ideas that the movie really is interrogating and working with. It doesn't really have any hard answers, but raising the questions to me is much more important than giving any hard answers, and I think that Priscilla does this excellently.
I want a life of my own.
So now at number 3, we have a movie that is probably going to be in everyone's top 3, 5, probably top 1 for a lot of people, and that is Oppenheimer. I think the best way to categorize Oppenheimer for me is as Nolan's most mature work. I have a bit of a complicated history with Nolan because I find his movies technically masterful. I think he's one of the greatest modern filmmakers. But personally, I would never say that I was really a fan. I never really connected with his movies on an emotional level. I enjoy them and I appreciate them for what they are, but emotionally, they just don't do it for me, which actually is why I enjoyed Tenet so much, because it just threw the emotion out the window and made a bonkers, insane movie. But this is more a return to traditional storytelling for Nolan and trying to blend technical craftsmanship with an emotional story. In this case, a very subjective yet somehow still vast landscape that Oppenheimer and all the ideas and the connections to history and all of those things, how they all intertwine in this one man and his life. I don't also think that it's a perfect movie though. And I think that comes back to the idea of maturity. Maturity for me is not craftsmanship. You can learn to expose a camera properly, set it up properly, and all this sort of stuff. Great. A lot of people can learn to do that. But you could have something that's underexposed, poorly lit, done a little bit funky, but the movie could be infinitely more mature because it has that sense to it, that ability to find nuance, to combine elements that shouldn't be combined, and to work with stuff. And so while I find bits of this movie awkward, I find a little bit of the pacing, the use of music a little weird. The sex scenes obviously are cool in concept, but feel a little amateurish and a little bit weird. There's all these little imperfections to me that just make this movie in a way so much better, because I can feel the person behind the camera and I can feel them trying to make this work. And I can also feel the perspective of Oppenheimer in that way. That human element of the director coming in humanizes the character a bit for me. I think there's tons of interesting stuff to discuss with this movie. Obviously, the historical elements, what is discussed, what is not discussed. Personally, I think there is a very clear reason this movie was released this year, because it's the year before an election year, and we have that bit of the Red Scare and politics and all these government assemblies, which is all sort of in the back of our minds, beginning to come to the forefront now that it's 2024. There's just a lot to discuss, and I think it is a beautifully nuanced, emotional, really well done, even with its little problems, which I just think make it so much better. It's just a great movie. And if you haven't seen it somehow, go ahead and see it. And I guess if you want to do the Barbenheimer after theaters, go ahead and do it. I did do it in theaters, actually with my whole family. Obviously, we did Oppenheimer first because that's the objectively correct thing to do. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Oppenheimer.
5, 4, 3.
At number 2 is The Holdovers. And for this movie, I actually couldn't come up with a quippy little one-liner to sort of summarize my thoughts on the movie, because it was truthfully such an emotional experience for me. I was really just expecting a straightforward comedy, and what I got was more of a dramedy. And that is not a knock against the movie, that is a good thing. It's just not what I expected. And I also didn't expect to be crying in the Cinemark hallway once this was over, but yet there I was. It is truly just a beautiful little movie. It might actually be my favorite holiday movie now. I could see myself returning to this one every year. It just has a little bit more emotion and content to it than I feel most other holiday movies do, except maybe It's a Wonderful Life. And of course, we have to talk about the fact that this is sort of a throwback movie in a lot of ways. It was shot on digital, but had a actually wonderful conversion over to film, to the point that I didn't know that it wasn't shot on film. And it has that sort of vibe of something like a Top Gun Maverick, that sort of has that, they don't make them like they used to, but going back a ways. And that might be my only complaint about the movie, is that it has that retro throwback vibe. I'm like, why don't you just set it in modern day? But I don't know. I don't think the story could work in modern day, and it really doesn't bug me that much. But all that is out of the way. Actual substance of the film. What is there? There's a lot to talk about. You can talk about the notion of what is family. Obviously, we have our family, our biological family, but we obviously have friend groups we'd probably consider family. Would you consider teachers and the school peers that you're with family? I think that a lot of people should, and if we were to do that more often, we might have a better school experience. There's also all sorts of stuff on love and loss and what it means to lose someone or to desire someone but not have that reciprocated. There's just a lot going on there with each of the characters. And then of course the unknowability of others, which I think is really the backbone of this movie. And it's a concept that I love and I think is very important. It's the fact that even if we sit beside someone, if they teach us, we see them every day, or a classmate and we see them every day, we don't really know what's going on in their lives, and we don't know what's going on inside of them. And if we just took the time to sit down with these people and really discuss with them and just hear them, maybe not discuss, but maybe just listen to them, there's so much that we could learn. There's so much more empathy and understanding that we could have just across the board with everyone. Obviously, it is a love letter to educators, and I think that that is perhaps the most important and most touching element of this film to me, because I think that teachers do often have a very hard job and have a bad rap and get a lot of crap a lot of times. And a lot of people just never take the time to connect with their teachers, which I think is horribly sad. Because I think in each stage of my educational journey, from like middle school to high school to college, there has been a teacher in each of those that I just took the time to get to know, and that took the time to get to know me. And they were some of the most formative people in my life. And I think that is really what connected with my story, is that it shows people the possibilities that you have whenever you just get to know someone and stop viewing them so much as an authority figure, but as a person themselves. Then it can be a very fruitful relationship that will really enrich your life, because they have so much more to tell you and expose you to. And especially if it's a teacher in an area like film or literature or art or history or math that you really are interested in and passionate about, that makes the relationship all that much better, because they're going to have so much more experience they're going to be able to bring to you. And it's just a super fruitful thing that I wish more people would engage with. They always think, oh, I can't talk to that person, I can't talk to the teacher. Do it. I guarantee your life will be so much better if you do. And that really is what this movie is about, is just getting to know people. And yeah, new favorite holiday movie. Tons of great stuff in it. I could ramble about it for a while. Probably already just did. But it is really wonderful. If you haven't seen it, I would highly, highly recommend it. And this is someone that generally doesn't like retrowave stuff. So that's a big deal for me to jump that hurdle and say this is 2, but it might even be my number 1 of the year once I look back at it.
The Holdovers.
So finally, at number 1 is Asteroid City. Obviously from this channel, you know that I'm a bit of a textual analysis, a film theory guy, and so obviously this movie is built for someone like me. I was sitting there before Asteroid City came out going, where is he gonna go next? Where is Wes Anderson gonna go next? I've seen everything he's done, I've always been a fan, but it felt like he was getting so deep into a style and this whimsical thing that he was sort of starting to box himself in, and I was like, I don't know how much longer he can keep doing the sort of same thing. And I guess a little bit with French Dispatch, he started going into a little bit of that metatextual area, and I was like, okay, that's interesting, but it felt a little bit disjointed there. But this is really his commitment to that, and I think it's an excellent step, because it takes style over substance and turns it into style as substance. There's a lot to unpack. I'm not gonna lie, it's been a minute since I've seen the movie, so I can't fully recall enough or work through enough, but I am looking forward to watching it again and trying to just piece all the little stuff together, because I think it's just a good story for one, very well written, but then that metatextual element adds so much to it that I really have a hard time picturing or fully coalescing in a full opinion on it, but I also have a hard time understanding how other people that just watch other Wes Anderson movies would feel about this. In fact, I actually talked to one of my friends, because I walked out of the theater going, oh, I love this. I loved what it was doing with the textual analysis and the ability of, history and all this sort of stuff. Loved all that. And I talked to one of my other friends who'd seen it, who I knew wasn't as interested in stuff like that. And I was like, what did you get out of it? They're like, I don't know. I liked it. It was pretty, and the story was pretty good. It made me sit there and go, who is this movie really made for? And I think that scared me a little bit, because I enjoyed it so much. I'm like, am I just the weirdo now? Finally, there is one last little thing, and it's really the thing that cemented this at number 1 for me, and that is the chant at the end of the film, you can't wake up if you don't fall asleep. So I know I've talked a lot about textual analysis and all that sort of form and content and, literary analysis, all that sort of stuff. Talked about all of that right before this. But it's interesting because the movie seems to be begging for that, but also at the same time saying that that is not great. I wonder if my perception of this line would change once I saw the movie again. But after my first viewing, I very much took this chant as a call to the audience and as a call to filmmakers to step back from the historical, the very meaning-centric, the very, what does this story mean? What does the ending mean? What does this character mean? Is this color used for a reason? This very like A, B, right, wrong sort of description of art, and to step back and just say, hey, you're gonna have to learn to do something different. And I think that is a very valuable opinion of textual criticism. I think it's something that needs to be done more often now, but just simply learning to sit back and just absorb is something you have to sort of learn. And I don't think enough people talk about that you can't just walk into everything and immediately go, oh, this means that, this means that. Sometimes they don't mean anything, and that's okay, and that's part of it. And there's this way to watch and to create that I feel that needs to be talked about more, that isn't so analytical, but more subjective and a little bit more subconscious, where you know all the techniques, all the forms like Nolan did, and then you reach a point where you sort of turn that off and just go with the vibe and sort of figure out okay, this feels right. Does it make sense? No, but it feels right, and sort of go with that. And I feel like despite all the metatextual elements of Asteroid City, that is its thesis. And I think really that is what cements this movie at number 1 for me, because that school of thought, that textual analysis, that ending explained style of thought is something that is prevalent, but it doesn't have to be. And it really isn't all of textual analysis. And going for that much more cerebral, letting it wash over you perspectives, I think something that general criticism needs right now. And I think the perfect way to do that is to try to prod the audience to textually analyze something and then withhold that and display your true thesis, which is just think, don't feel. Going back to Tenet, I guess. So that's my best of 2023 list. There's probably a couple movies that you expected to see in that top 5 that you might not have. Maybe I did see them, maybe I didn't. If I did see them, they'll be in that Letterboxd list linked in the description, so you can go get angry at me. But yeah, that's it. Adios.